Brisket is the best cut of barbecue, but unfortunately, it's the hardest one to cook. Until today, because I'm gonna show you every corner to cut and shortcut to take to create the ultimate beginner brisket recipe that anyone can make at home. Will it be perfect? No. But will it be super easy to follow and incredibly delicious? Absolutely. Wow. Okay, so the first thing you have to decide is where to get your brisket, and for that I have two options. The first option is to buy the cheapest brisket you can find at the grocery store, and this is usually around $3 to $4 a pound unless it's on clearance. But if you go with this option, I highly recommend that you trim your brisket. Now recently I've seen a couple of videos by Smoking Joe's Barbecue and Dogfather Barbecue where they did a no trim brisket. And although the meat in both of their cooks came out super juicy, there was just so much unrendered fat on their briskets. And that fat is just chewy and really unpleasant to eat. But I'll have links to both of those untrimmed brisket videos in the description box if you're interested. That way you can watch and make the decision for yourself. But if you take my advice and you want to trim your brisket, I have a video that's less than 5 minutes long that's a clear step-by-step guide that you can follow at home. And I'll have that video linked in the description box as well. Now the other brisket option. So if you're willing to pay extra, you can do what I'm doing today, which is using a pre-trimmed brisket from Porter Road. Okay, full transparency here, they sent me this brisket for free, and I am an affiliate of Porter Road, so you can check my link in the description box if you want to help and support the channel. But this is not a sponsored video, and I am not being paid to tell you this. With that said, although this brisket is pretty expensive, you got to remember that it's pre-trimmed, so there is no waste with this brisket. Normally, you cut off about 1/3 of the brisket in fat, connective tissue, and in meat that's just too thin to cook. But with this pre-trimmed brisket, you just open up the package, it's ready for seasoning, and then just put it on your grill. The beef I have had from Porter Road has been so good. Most recently, I made some beef short chuck ribs from Porter Road for a video that has not come out yet, and oh my goodness, these beef ribs were absolutely insane. So again, link in the description if you want to check out their briskets and other cuts. Moving on to the seasoning. So you can pretty much do whatever you want to do here. You can go salt and pepper, you can use your favorite barbecue rub, or you can do all three like I'm doing today with salt, pepper, and Goldie's brisket rub. However, with that freedom, I have two warnings. The first thing I recommend is that you use a coarse pepper because this will really help with the crust or bark of your finished brisket. Most people will tell you that you need 16 mesh pepper, but I don't think that you absolutely have to. I have always used the table grind pepper from Walmart, and I have no idea what mesh that is. The second thing is make sure that you use enough salt. So because I've done so many briskets, I can kind of eyeball and tell how much is enough salt while I'm seasoning. But if you're a beginner, then you have no reference to eyeball measurements. So I actually measured how much salt I put on this brisket in grams. So with that information, I will calculate the grams of salt per pound of brisket that I use, and I'll leave that in the description box if you need it. Also, I used weight for this calculation so that if you're using table salt or Diamond Crystal kosher salt or kosher salt, the calculation will still work. So today I'll be using my Weber Smoky Mountain 18-inch because I think this is the best barbecue pit for beginners. This smoker gives you a good deep smoke flavor on whatever you're cooking, runs almost as easy as a pellet grill, and has a super small footprint if you have a really tiny backyard or a small balcony area. And most importantly, this is one of the cheapest smokers you can buy. I literally just looked this up on Facebook Marketplace, but I found a Weber Smoky Mountain 18-inch with a cover for $100 used. But brand new, they're about $350. So I'll have a link in the description if you want to check out the specs of this smoker. But for those of you who are planning to cook your brisket in a pellet grill, a Weber kettle, or an offset smoker, I have detailed video guides on how I smoke brisket in each one of these cookers in the description box. And with that, I will say that you shouldn't take all the temps and the signs that I'm about to show you with the Weber Smoky Mountain and then just straight apply it to a different cooker, because each smoker operates in its own way. So just be mindful of that. Okay, so first you're gonna need some hardwood chunks. Now you can get these at Home Depot, Lowe's, Academy Sports, and sometimes even grocery stores. The type you use is totally up to you. I've used hickory, pecan, post oak, and they've all made great briskets. So put about 4 chunks of wood at the bottom of the charcoal ring in a circle, and then put 1 chunk of wood in the center. Putting the wood chunks underneath the charcoal like this will allow them to smolder instead of full-on burning. This will give us a really good smoke flavor, and it will also ensure that our wood chunks will smolder throughout the majority of the cook. Then cover the entire charcoal grate with either briquettes or lump charcoal like I'm using here. Fill it up all the way to the top, because even if you have leftover charcoal after the cook is over, you can always close all the vents, kill the fire, and save save the unused charcoal for next time. Next, I like to bury a Weber lighter cube under the top middle of our charcoal pile and light it up. This is like the lazy man version of the mini method that I learned from Harry Sue, and this will allow the lit charcoal to slowly burn from the center outward, making sure we get 10+ hours of good smoking time with the fuel that we have in there. Now, these Weber lighter cubes are fairly cheap at about $5 for a pack of 24, and you can get them at Home Depot or Amazon, so they're widely available. But alternatively, for an even cheaper option, you can just get a paper towel, fold it up, and put some vegetable oil on it and use that instead. This is a handy trick that I learned from my buddy SJ Cooks. Okay, now assemble the smoker, except for me, I'm leaving out the water pan. I like to do this because it allows the fat from the brisket to drip down onto the coals, giving us a very nice added flavor. Open the 3 bottom vents and the top vent to get the smoker to our target temperature of 225 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, I've found that the stock temperature gauge on the lid of the Weber Smoky Mountain is about 30 degrees cooler than the cooking grate where the brisket is going to be. So be sure to keep this in mind as you cook. Once the cooker reaches 225 degrees Fahrenheit, close down all of the bottom vents, but keep the top one fully open. And maintain the pit temperature between 225 degrees Fahrenheit and 250 degrees Fahrenheit. And I like to stay closer to 250 degrees Fahrenheit because it just allows the brisket to be done quicker. And just be mindful that your mileage may vary with this pit setup depending on your climate. But just know that the more open you have your vents, the hotter the cooker is going to get, and the less open you have them, the cooler it will get. And then just adjust them when you need to. And also, if your pit gets way out of control in terms of temperature and you're just way hotter than the 250 degree mark that we were talking about, then feel free to just close down all 4 of the vents and then just open them up slowly as the pit begins to regulate back down to that 225 to 250 range. Many hours later, and this brisket is ready to wrap. And we know this because the bark is nice and dark, the fat is rendered on the top of the brisket, and it's temping in the center of the brisket at the high 160s to the 170s. So to wrap this brisket, I recommend that you use foil, because foil is like the duct tape of the barbecue world. You can use it for almost anything, which I'll show you in just a moment. So place a good sized piece of foil on your work surface, just enough to completely cover the brisket. Then you're gonna wrap your hands in foil and grab the brisket off of the cooker and place it on the big piece you just cut. Alternatively, you could use a cotton liner and a nitrile glove, but if you only barbecue a couple of times a year, then just save your money. Now wrap up the brisket and then put it back on the cooker. And I like to go lean side down when I put it back because all the juice that's gonna come out of the brisket and pool at the bottom of the foil will keep the lean part of the brisket nice and moist. At this point, I would recommend to bump up the pit temperature to about 275 degrees just so that this brisket can finish in the wrap. So you can open up the bottom vents to increase the temperature, or even easier, you can just take your brisket and then put it inside in your kitchen oven at 275 degrees and then just let it finish in there. And you know it's done once you probe it and it doesn't feel super tight. Harry Sue describes the feeling like sticking your probe into a jar of peanut butter. Now, I don't like to give temperatures because every brisket is different, but if I had to give one, I'd say you probably want to pull it at around 195 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, you absolutely have to rest this brisket, but in terms of how long you rest it, that part doesn't really matter. You can hold it for 15 hours or you can just rest it for 2 hours and then serve it right away. Just rest it as long as you need to for your convenience. And you want to slice your brisket once the internal temperature reaches 140 degrees Fahrenheit. But at the same time, you do not want the internal temperature to drop below that during the rest for food safety reasons. So rest it in a cooler or in your recalibrated kitchen oven at 140 degrees Fahrenheit, or just put it on your kitchen counter to rest at room temperature. Whatever method you use, just keep the brisket above 140 degrees Fahrenheit for the entire resting period. Once rested, the easiest way to slice a brisket is to first cut the brisket in half right where the 2 muscles of the brisket meet. And you can tell where this is by looking at the profile of the brisket and cutting right where the brisket hits the top of the slope. Then cut your lean side straight across and try to get nice pencil thick slices. Now, a note here, you are not perfectly cutting against the grain of the meat, but because of the way the brisket fibers lay, you are cutting diagonally against them, so your slices will still have a good chew. Again, we're going for easy, not perfect. For the point, just cut perpendicular to the cut you made and try again for those pencil thick slices. So again, not perfect, but man, it is a dang good brisket that your family and friends will absolutely love. I'm telling you, follow this recipe and bring this brisket to your next work potluck and your coworkers are going to ask you to cater for their next event. guaranteed. Again, this is my super easy beginner brisket recipe, but if you guys want to know how to make a brisket like a professional and unlock the secrets of Texas style barbecue, then make sure to watch the next video on your screen and I'll see you guys over there.